Hello, I'm Bill Leopold. Welcome to this edition of Breakfast at the Barracks. Joining me today is D.T. Ogilvie, Associate Professor of Management and Global Business and Founding Director for the Center of Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development at Rutgers, Newark. D.T., welcome.
Oh, thank you, Bill. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
I'm glad to have you on. You teach one of my favorite things, leadership, strategic thinking, and creativity. But how does someone translate some of those abstract ideas into real concepts? How do you teach those kind of things?
Well, people always ask me, can you teach creativity? And I say yes. And my students find out that, yes, they can learn. As an example, one of my favorite examples was when I was teaching in our China program. I had a student from India who was the area manager for Coca-Cola.
Okay.
And he told me that the Chinese people, his workers, aren't creative. So shortly after he took my course, he had an assignment to come up with a slogan for Coke. And he brainstormed with his people and came up with what he described as garbage.
Okay.
So then he got a brainstorm. He said, why don't I try some of that stuff Professor D.T. did in class? And he did, and then he and his manager said his people came up with more than 150 great ideas.
Oh, wow.
They distilled that down to one, put it in the marketplace, and went head-to-head with Pepsi, which is the largest soda retailer in China. It tied with them on some dimensions, beat him on a bunch of others, won an advertising award, and he's been promoted twice since.
Oh, wow.
When I visited Coke about a year or two later in Shanghai, they knew the story. And so, that one class paid for his whole education.
That's amazing.
In the executive MBA program. Companies need to be creative, and that's how it meshes with strategy. Strategy is determining the direction a company will go in and what it will do, how it will form itself, how it will develop its products and services, and how it will bring those from conception to implementation. So creativity is not just coming up with an idea for a new product or service, but it should be through the whole value chain. As an example, years ago when they sold stockings, they sold them in department stores. And then a company called Legs came up with the idea of putting them in these little plastic eggs, but selling them in supermarkets. So their creativity was not just the egg, but the channel of distribution, where you sell your products. Google, as an example of a company that's creative, they developed a search engine and we created a whole company, multi-billion-dollar company around it. So if you look at creativity, it's essential. The problem with American industry today is that our leadership is not focusing on creativity and innovation. They give lip service. They say they want to be creative, but they don't create a culture of creativity. And so they get stuck in doing things that don't make much sense in the long term.
I'm glad you brought up the idea of culture. A lot of information out there on Google, and a lot of information on the environment at Google in terms of folks being able to go into creativity rooms, having some flexibility, being able to nourish their own productivity time. So how does the environment and creativity link? Like, I know Google's a prime example. I just don't know what other companies are doing to kind of spark that.
The leader of the company, and this is where leadership fits in, has to allow people to be creative, which means they are allowed to make mistakes. Creativity is not perfect out of the box. Think about Edison in developing the light bulb. He did 1,000 or more tries at figuring out what the filament should be. And each of those tries created some learning. So he learned something about the product he was trying to create the filament out of, as well as finding out that it didn't work to light the light bulb. Nowadays, in most companies, if you fail 2 or 3 times, you're out the door.
Right, it's a success ratio.
And
it's based
because
upon
people
dollars.
expect you to be successful right away with a creative idea. So sometimes it takes time. So it takes a leader to understand the process of creativity and that you're going to have some failures. You want to minimize the impact of the failures and have small failures, which means you have to create a culture of experimentation, trying some things, seeing if they work, trying and trying again. I would submit to you that one definition of creativity could be the recovery from a succession of failures. And it's not really a failure till you stop.
And each failure is a learning experience.
Yes, definitely.
And I know your students talk great things about you, and I think one of the things that they really like is your ability to take theory and put it into practice. So can you talk a little bit about how you incorporate that into your classroom experience?
Yes, I do a couple of things. I have students actually work on problems with real companies. So they get a chance to apply what they're learning in the classroom to a real problem, to a real situation. And for the strategy class, which is my primary class, is that students will do strategy projects. So they don't do make work type of projects, but they really get involved in helping a company do strategic planning, thinking about their strategy, etc. So now they really actually are internalizing what they're learning in the classroom, and they have experience that they can then translate to getting jobs. On their job interview, they have something to talk about more than just I took a bunch of classes and got an A.
And not to mention the fact that not only are they being consultant to those companies, so
right.
to speak, but they also get a consultant in you to kind of run
right.
their ideas
yes,
past
yeah.
about
and,
what
and
works.
in class, what we do, actually, I have my students do what we call peer mentoring.
Okay.
So a team will have a time in the classroom to talk about their project, if they're having any problems, get some feedback from the other students. And so that helps them to build skills throughout the classroom.
Oh, wow.
And it makes them better employees, better representatives of the Rutgers business education.
Now, you don't just talk this talk. You're also in the midst of really doing it.
Yes.
You're really in the midst of working in a partnership with the business school, business, as well as the city of Newark.
Yes.
And you're running a center that is really critical to some of the redevelopment around Newark.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the center and what the
Yes.
center's mission is?
We started the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development in late 2008. And the purpose of the center is to create a model for urban entrepreneurship so that other universities in urban settings can replicate, to create wealth in the urban community, and to be the leading research, education, and outreach center of entrepreneurship in the country. Well, actually in the world,
All right.
if I may be modest.
You can be as honest as you want to be.
So we've had great success. We've partnered with the city of Newark. As an example, Halsey Street, which is a street in Newark. Broad Street is a major street in Newark. Halsey Street is the next street over, and then University.
And just for historical context, Halsey was not the best street with the best reputation.
Right. When I came here, Halsey was almost a dead street.
It was a dead street with some
a lot of boarded up, destitute, abandoned, seemingly abandoned buildings. Not the most pleasant street.
Correct.
So people generally walked past it. Not much activity, not much traffic on the street. So we started the center. We had a fund that we partner with Profeta Urban Investment Foundation, and we've been able to fund some businesses. So just by putting some money into a few businesses there, the street has transformed. We're working with the city. The city has now made that a demonstration area. They're putting money into streetscape and facade improvements. More businesses have moved in that aren't part of what we're doing, and it's making a big difference. And we're working with some other businesses now that want to move in there. Our thesis is that most people do economic development, is what I would call scattershot.
Right.
They put a business here, a business there, a business here. So you get no traction. We're trying to build a critical mass on the area and reach a tipping point that will cascade out through the area. And it seems to be working.
Well, and Halsey Street, strangely enough, was one of those scenes for one of the Beyonce movies and films.
Yes.
And after that, it was one of those things where there seemed to be different interest in it. And
Right.
that's when your center came into existence well after that. But it really has done a lot. There's this particular business called the Coffee Cave.
Right.
Can you talk about a little bit about the Coffee Cave and
Yes.
its mission and kind of what it does to Halsey Street, especially after hours, so to speak?
Right. Coffee Cave, I guess, was the first business that we invested in. And that started a buzz on the street. The mayor came out to our launch, just showing the support of the city. We had a lot of press. John has evolved the Coffee Cave into an evening spot. The students have their meetings there. Other people use his Coffee Cave as a place to have parties and events, and so it's become a big part of the street. We've also put some money into Newark Art Supply, and that was with the city and City National Bank and GMBDC, Greater Newark Business Development Consortium. And they have an art cafe in the Newark Art Supply, and that's gotten a lot of traffic and some buzz. We've also put some money into a copy shop, Porter Print, and so we're getting more and more business. And now we're getting ready to launch in the next month or two another luncheon place and a catering kitchen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is a wonderful caterer. I think one of the best that we've seen.
And
Craving's a caterer.
And one of the things that's really important about Halsey that we didn't mention yet is it's really a block from the Newark campus.
Yes.
So there is student life after hours that before wasn't there.
Right, and you see people up and down the street now. There's 27 Mixes in the next block. Around the corner is Nick's. We're looking at putting another rhythm and blues restaurant, so we're working with the owners to get that off the ground. And we're looking at putting a jazz club on that street, and those two will make a difference. What we wanted was a 24/7 university. We have about 30,000 students in the area between Rutgers, NJIT, UMD, and Essex.
Right.
And no place to go. If they want to go, they have to go to New York. But why not stay in Newark, enjoy Newark, save some money traveling and time, and have a great time and a safe time.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Halsey is, like you said, first of all, I would really encourage folks, if they haven't yet, go to the Coffee Cave, to go to the Art Supply, which has the cafe in the middle of it. Best cupcakes, by the way.
Yes, wonderful.
But what's great about that, too, is you get to see on the same street a suit-making shop, some nail and hair salons. So it's really a kind of diverse...
It is a diverse set of businesses. A travel agency. Lamont makes the ties, beautiful ties.
Yeah.
And very affordable.
And it really has kind of brought some life right outside the campus into that area specifically.
And the owners of the properties have now spiffed up their properties. We now have a Japanese restaurant that's coming in next door to Newark Art Supply. So a lot of activity on that street, and just started with putting some money into one business.
Well, I know business creativity also has an effect on self-esteem.
Yes.
I can only imagine the self-esteem that really the business owners are kind of seeing.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about their kind of attitude and their development as they were going through this?
I think success, you know, as people, these are just regular people like yourself, myself. They go into business, they have a dream that they want to realize, and as they start seeing that coming to fruition, as customers start coming in, it does create self-esteem, a pride in oneself to have achieved something. You know, it's how our country started. You know, people went out and pioneered and created businesses, and, you know, here we are now. The problem, though, I see, in getting back to creativity, is that we're falling behind. If you look at countries around the world, in Europe and Asia, China, in their 5-year plan every year has creativity as part of their 5-year plan. They are focused on it. By 2020, they expect to be the most innovative nation. By 2050, they expect to be the top science nation in the world. And they're relentless and determined and focused. And in our country, we're squabbling over basically meaningless things, creating all this political dissension rather than dealing with the real issues. We need to put people into business. It's small business that drives the economy, small and medium-sized enterprises. It's not the large businesses. And the nation needs to put support behind those businesses. We're a nation of entrepreneurs. We need to get back to that if we're going to maintain our position in the world. And so we hope to be a part of that.
I was going to say, I'm sure you hope to be a part of that with the center. Let's talk about a little bit about how the center supports those folks. I know that you're really instrumental in kind of giving them some advice.
Yes.
At moving ahead, how does the center really help those folks who are already there and potentially new folks coming in?
What we do is we have a program called Entrepreneurship Pioneers Initiative, and that's a training program. And what we did, we trained, we just had a graduation in January, 50 entrepreneurs. These are people in various stages of their business who have some experience. The thing that distinguishes them is that these are what we call first-generation entrepreneurs. They didn't grow up at the family table talking about how to do business. And so they didn't develop the tacit understanding of business. Through our training program, it's had a tremendous impact. People who are on the verge, kind of teetering on the verge of whether they were going to be maintaining their business or not, are now on solid ground. Businesses are growing, hiring new people. Some businesses are expanding. And so, and the businesses are doing business with each other, which is wonderful to see. And they actually formed their own monthly meetings. So they meet every month, even though the program's over, but the program stimulated their interest and the value.
Great. Well, we wish you continued success. We've run out of time, but you know, it's fascinating. And I really appreciated you having on here.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for coming on the show, and I hope to have you back to talk about more success with the center and what you're doing in terms of your own teaching.
Thank you.
No problem. Joining me is Rob Blumenshine, Professor of Anthropology and Director of the Center for Human Evolutionary Studies at Rutgers, New Brunswick. Thanks, Rob, for joining us.
Pleasure, Bill.
I read through your studies, I read through some of what you do. It's a little kind of complicated to explain, so I'm going to give you a chance. Kind of what do you do and kind of what's your research about?
Well, fundamentally, I've always been very impressed with how odd human beings are as animals compared to others. After all, we have this very large brain that consumes a whole lot of the body's energy. We are absolutely dependent upon technology for our survival. We have become the top predators in almost all ecosystems on the planet, except a few, despite the fact that our ancestral heritage is largely vegetarian. we can live in small groups, living off of the land, or in sprawling metropolises with very complicated governmental and institutional systems.
Okay.
And so I've always been interested in what the roots of these very distinctive human adaptations are.
Which is what we get to the hominid. What is a hominid, and can you give us a definition of what a hominid is for our viewers?
Hominids are any member of the ancestral lineage leading to humans. We are hominids ourselves.
Okay.
After the split with chimpanzees, our closest living relatives. So there are a series of extinct branches on the human family tree, but also ones that led directly to us.
All right. Part of your research talks about hominids being, and their nutrition. And hominids, we usually think of as humans as hunters and gatherers. I know I've been taught that through my educational process. You come up with a different philosophy. You say they're much more scavengers in nature. Can you talk a little bit about the distinction between the two and how you came to that realization for yourself?
Yeah. Well, hunting has always been seen as the major catalyst which selected for individuals with these capabilities of being able to make stone tools, to cooperate in large groups, individuals with large brains able to plan hunts and that sort of thing. But when we look at the human fossil record, which now stretches all the way back to about 6 million years ago, right to the time of the projected common ancestry, last common ancestry with chimpanzees, we see, in fact, a long period when we had the typical primate types of omnivorous diets, including no large animals in the diet. And then all of a sudden, around 2.5 million years ago, a number of things happened. We see the appearance of the first species of the genus Homo, our genus. Its name was Homo habilis. And at the same time, we see for the first time in human evolution substantial increases in brain size over that of the apes. We see the appearance of flake stone technology, very, very simple technology that most folks would not even recognize as tools. And we also see the beginnings of this new source of food from larger animals of a size that was never included in any primate diet before. And so I think it's at this time, around 2.5 million years ago, that we have the origin of many of these distinctive human traits. Now, hunting used to be seen as the primary adaptation driving all of this, but it became clear in the early 1980s that our ancestors were small, were slow, were ill-equipped to be hunters. There is nothing in this primitive stone technology suggestive of any sort of effective weaponry. And so, yet you see at the earliest archaeological sites a lot of evidence that our ancestors were benefiting from the meat and the marrow on large animal carcasses. And so, of course, an alternative to hunting is scavenging. And so I did in the early 80s something really not traditionally archaeological at all, which is to spend a year in the Serengeti National Park in Tanzania, observing how various carnivores consume carcasses, looking at the amounts of food and types of food they leave on carcasses for a would-be early hominid scavenger, and then observing the types of damage inflicted by the carnivores and subsequently by hominids through my experiments with stone tool butchery on these bones themselves, so that we would be in a position to examine the bones from these early archaeological sites and try to detect the physical traces on the bones which would be indicative of either scavenging or a hunting mode of acquiring these animals.
Okay. You talk a lot about Africa, and your work happens in Africa, in the Serengeti. Why that choice? Why not someplace like Iceland? Why not someplace like someplace else? Why specifically Central Africa?
Africa is the cradle of humankind. There's no doubt about it. The earliest fossils in our lineage for the first 4 million years of hominid evolution occur in Africa. And so if one is interested in understanding the roots of human behavior, then one needs to base one's work on the African continent, looking at the fossil record, looking at the archaeological traces of their behavior. And furthermore, Africa preserves today many well-protected ecosystems similar in structure to those in which our ancestors evolved, like the Serengeti. And so you have a wonderful opportunity to simultaneously investigate the human fossil record and to visit and study these modern ecosystems to try to see how hominids with these primitive characteristics may have made a living on those landscapes.
Not only do I know you've done your research work out of this, but you've also created a center that really gets into some of this kind of research. Can you talk to us about the center, what its mission is, kind of what it does, and how it ties back to your research?
The Center for Human Evolutionary Studies was created in 1996 in recognition of the fact that Rutgers is unique among all programs in the world of having world-class faculty expertise in all aspects of human evolutionary studies. The kind of work that I do with the human fossil record, I and several other colleagues are engaged in that. We have a geologist on our staff who helps to reconstruct the environmental settings in which our ancestors lived. Yet we also have world-class expertise in primatology, the study of our closest living relatives, and in the biology of human behavior itself. And so students are able to get an extremely holistic perspective on human evolution, one which is very necessary given how sparse the fossil evidence is for our evolutionary history.
So I'm a student in anthropology. I'm interested in the center and this kind of interdisciplinary perspective, what it sounds like. So explain to me how students come in. Are they graduate students? Are they undergraduate students? And what's the students' level of involvement in the center?
Students come in right at the introductory level. We have a unique Bachelor of Science degree in evolutionary anthropology, which is attractive not only to students who know they've been interested in anthropology for some time, but to students who begin their academic careers in the various biological sciences. And so we attract students from a wide range of disciplines, which creates a very vibrant environment. And even undergraduates are able in our program to be able to become involved in some of our research. One of the center's premier programs is the Kubifora Field School for Paleoanthropology, run by my colleague Professor Harris in the Department of Anthropology. And this is the top human origins field school in the world. And Rutgers undergraduates have an opportunity to go to a very remote location in northern Kenya called Kubifora, one of the finest sites in the world for investigating human origins, comparable in importance to the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where I do my work. And so the undergraduates and the graduate students, of course, have access to these premier sites for investigating the fossil evidence for human origins, while at the same time being exposed to world-class experts in primatology and the biology of human behavior.
No, do students actually get to travel to those sites to be able to work alongside you, to kind of ask questions and kind of get really involved in that kind of area?
Absolutely, and we do quite a bit of this, certainly as much as we can. The Kubifora Field Schools run through study abroad, and we try to provide supplementary funds for students to do this work. Graduate students are integrally involved in our projects, and we have had numerous master's and PhD theses generated through these projects over the years for not only American students, New Jersey residents enrolled in Rutgers, but also for international students, including those from Africa itself, who have trained in our programs and have subsequently gone back to their home countries to take leadership roles in the human origins research.
Wow, amazing. Listen, I know you're working on a brand new project in South Africa. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that before we go?
Well, this is very exciting. We have been trying to develop a means of educating the public, from school children right up through to the general public, in the importance of human origins research. It is Africa which has the richest human heritage on the planet, and it is something which the citizens of the African continent can take great pride in. We here often associate the African continent with problems, but it's rich treasures in not only human origins, but also in the natural heritage and in the environments that are protected today, is certainly a global treasure which needs to be appreciated by citizens of Africa. And also, of course, we want to further develop the technical and academic skills among African scholars so that they can take these leadership roles in the human origins projects, both to develop the scientific information, but also to help disseminate this to peoples around the world.
Okay, well, my producer's telling me you're running out of time. It sounds like you're doing some great stuff, and you really are doing a great, education perspective, especially around Africa. So I wish you good luck with your new project. I'd love to come over and see the center sometime. But that's all we have at this time for this edition of Breakfast at the Barracks. For more information about any of the subject we've discussed here today, please visit our website at rutgers.tv. For all of us at the Rutgers Division of Continuing Studies, I'm Bill Leipold, and thanks for watching.